Hello and welcome to Ditching Hourly. I'm Jonathan Stark, and today I am joined by guest Kevin Freidberg. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Jonathan.
Just to get started, could you give folks a little bit of information about who you are and what you do?
So I write websites that get prospects interested in what you do in 7 seconds or less. And so my company is 7 second websites.
Nice. Great. Okay, so we've been working together over the years, on and off, and today we want to talk about the way that you've adapted my sort of typical the why conversation sales interview process so that it works for you. So could we kind of just have a discussion around that? How does a sales conversation start off with you? Where does a lead come from? You can start anywhere.
So, and I grew up in sales, and it just was always a real struggle for me. I did not want to do it. Just watching my dad do it, I just went, I want nothing to do with that. So I became a writer, and I thought, well, that's far enough away from that, so that's good. Um, and then at some point, I realized, like, oh, I really can't grow my business without sales. And so that led me to this sort of journey of how to have a sales call that I could be good at.
Mm,
Um, and I just wasn't, honestly, like, not to be too self-critical, but I wasn't very good at it. And when I first heard your podcast about the why conversation, it was really just um, I don't I think part of it may have been just this sort of spirit of generosity. There was something behind that just opened up my brain to
mm,
go, oh, that's a different way. It doesn't feel like selling. It's just it satisfied my intense curiosity to help someone selflessly.
hmm
Um, yeah, so as soon as I heard it, it was one of those moments I remember where I was and what I was doing. And I was like, I want to get good at this. And it led me down this path to eventually working with you one on one. And I just there was another shift that needed to happen because I just kept going on these calls, and I'd just start with, you know, sort of a why this. And
hmm
I'm still figuring out why, but I wouldn't leave those calls feeling very good.
hmm
And with making a lot of sales, and I just wasn't sure how I was helping them out particularly. And so finally, I had this dream of, like, I'm a writer and I have these questions I need to get answered, and they're laser focused, as you would say, and I
hmm
adopted that exact term um, on the prospect. And I was just like, if I what I love more than anything is I just want to ask you three questions when you're on the call. I just want the words that only you have, the person showing up on that call, that can help me help you sell your prospect.
Right.
And I was like, if I could just get these words, my life would. Once I get those words, I don't even care if I make the sale. I'm just like, I got the words. I'm all set. If I go broke doing this, I don't even care. I just want these darn words. And so I just finally I had this attorney. This was only like a month ago.
Mm.
He showed up for a sales call, and
No,
I
this is a
just got
lead. This is a
this is a lead.
okay.
Yeah, this is a pretty decent lead from LinkedIn,
hmm
and I have a little campaign I run that has just been really successful. And um, he showed up, and I just thought, this guy, he's all set. I don't think he really needs what I have to offer. But boy, is he interesting.
hmm
So I just was very relaxed, and I went, I am going to do this as if he is already a client
Mm.
and is already paying me, and I'm going to start it out like just like that. As I'm going to use these specific questions as if he's signed a contract and he's just all into what I do. And I'm like, oh, cool, let's start. Here's how I do it. Here's my questions. And
hmm
that first question is, what is the problem your prospect is coming to you to solve, Mr. Attorney?
hmm
Um, and I, even because I'm kind of a nervous, a little bit of a nervous guy who loves a good script,
hmm
uh, I wrote out a script because I was just like, plus I'd never done it before. And I just said, hey, I don't, basically, like, I know you're busy and I'm real busy. Do you mind if we just dive right into this?
Love it.
And he was, and this has happened every single time since then. The answer is always absolutely. They never hesitate. They don't really, because I used to always start it off with some pleasantries like my name, like
Mhm.
I'm Kevin Freidberg. How are you? How's the weather?
Yeah.
Whatever. And I don't even introduce myself. I don't say my name. I just, you can see my face. That's probably enough.
Uh-huh.
And I just say, can I just dive right in? And they're like, absolutely. And I go, okay, and then I sound almost like a game show host. I'm like,
Uh-huh.
here's the deal. I made a small tweak to your LinkedIn profile. I'm going to ask you 3 questions, and then we're going to see if we can make that tweak 10% better. Is
Hmm.
that okay?
Hmm.
And they say, uh-huh, or absolutely, that's awesome. And I'm like, cool. And I'm like, what is the, I give them the tweak
Hmm.
and I say, I think you can get 10% better. What is the problem your prospect is coming to you to solve? And it's game over from then. It is
Hmm.
game over. I am just happy as a clam. They look like they're happy and they just go in and they just talk about this problem. And then I go, okay, now let's back up. And I go, who is this prospect? And that's, of course, positioning. And they
You're
go,
asking them who their prospect is,
yeah,
right?
who is your product? Like
Just to
we've
keep.
already kind of gone into the problem. And I'm like, oh, wait, let's back up. Who is this person?
Hmm.
And that leads to more
Yeah, their
talking
target
on their
market.
part. I
Yeah.
shut the hell up because I'm very curious and taking voracious notes.
Hmm.
And they get to do their thing. And then I say, what issues are they struggling with in their business? They go on and on and on
Hmm.
sometimes.
Hmm.
And then I say, how are you sort of uniquely qualified to solve this problem? And boy, can they talk about that? And they can see the document because it's a Zoom. I'm sharing my screen. I'm like, look, there are no secrets here. This is your document. When we're done, you may have it, and I'll give you access. You can deny me access when you're done. There's sensitive information. You cut me out of the loop. I mean, that's all good. But when we're done, and I'm kind of like a little bit like dancing I'm tap dancing a little bit at the end because I'm like, all right, here we go. I'm going to have to try to make this 10% better based off all this content you've given me
Hmm.
and 100% of the time. And of course, and they're contributing. They're like, that's good. But what if we change this word or that? And I'm like, yes, that's awesome. And I'm like, here it is. How do you feel about this new headline
Hmm.
profile? And they're like, I love it. And I'm like, and then I can either say like, well, I can help you finish the page, or anything else you need. But more importantly, would you like to meet again, say next week? And almost always they're like, holy crap, would I ever? Um, and there's been some kind of, I don't know how to describe it. Maybe it's some kind of bond because we're sort of in the soup
Hmm.
together, just figuring that now we're on the same team. Like, oh yeah, that's good, but what about this and that?
Yeah,
Um,
they're leaned way in.
yeah, they're just, and it's like they get to see me working. This is how it's like to work with me. It doesn't look any different no matter what we're doing. And you're gonna leave with this new thing that you feel good about because you're putting down some words too. Um,
Right. So they're bought
and it,
in.
yeah, it just, I don't know. It just feels like uh, it's so then at some point, it doesn't usually happen in that first call. It's almost always the second call when it is time for me to sell you or here's how I can help. And I use the same document that from the first call. And as you scroll down, it becomes basically your proposal, Jonathan Stark's
Hmm.
proposal,
Hmm.
um, um, and they basically helped me write the proposal because we've all this work we've done is kind of filling in all these blanks, and it's just an ugly looking Google Doc
Hmm.
with just words. There's no visuals, stock photography I'm pulling in,
Hmm.
and then there's a there's three options, and there's the benefits and deliverables and outcomes,
And now
and then
you're
there's a
creating those
stripe.
on the fly, or those are you
The,
creating?
the, the last call, I really did. I was out of time, and I did not. I think I didn't wind up putting. I have sort of stock benefits and deliverables. I just pulled in at the last minute,
Hmm.
um, but it was enough. What happened was where I got so excited was I was like, okay, so we've solved this line, and we've kind of fleshed out more of your prospect and how they could sort of contact you on LinkedIn and your positioning and all of the good stuff. So it sort of just very naturally said, now I'd like to ask you, what is your problem? Like, what do you need? And then
Hmm.
that they come in with website or LinkedIn page or whatever. Why this?
Hmm. Yeah.
Oh, this, that, the other. Okay, and why now? And then of course, because we've been working together for already half an hour on the first call, maybe 20 minutes on the second.
Uh,
Now I really can just say, why me? And they go, well, holy cow. I mean, that last call, I'm still we went and used that in a meeting last week, or we changed our page.
yeah.
If you go to our homepage, our headline is different now because of our work. And they're selling me. And then I can go, okay, here's how I can help. And I just, because I had gotten to that why me, which is my favorite thing.
Mm.
Like that was so mind blowing, Jonathan. I can't even tell you to boldly say to someone, "Why me?" is crazy. Like that, nobody does that. It takes
Yeah.
a lot of guts. And but a lot of times they would say, I'd sort of forget where I am, and they go, "Well, I don't know. You called me," or there was just a little bit of that, like
Yeah.
somebody
Before.
told me to call you,
Yeah.
and I'd be like, oh, okay, cool. And that never happens now. They're like, because this, because that.
Hmm.
They really get to sell me on me, and and then I'm like, okay, well, here's how I don't. Just to, truth be told, like I know the why conversation is really meant for value pricing, and I do really at this point. It might be different later with this latest turn of events, but I still do productized services.
Right.
Um,
Hmm.
but it just again for my when this is what you and I worked on together for my purposes, because I do have a little bit of that anxiety of like I don't know what to say next. Um, that gives me even that gives me a little script of like, oh, I offer this. The prices are on my website, which you can kind of check, and it just is nice for me to not have to sort of make stuff up on the spot.
Right.
But yeah,
That's great. Yeah. So basically, it's kind of like you give them, first hits free. You get like a 30-minute working session where they get a tangible outcome, and it's a tangible experience of an intangible thing, I suppose, where they feel what it's like to finally have clarity about that, that little snippet of their positioning on their LinkedIn headline or wherever. And they can feel the transformation. So you don't have to like, you're just demonstrating for them, like, you know how much better it's going to feel when you actually know what to say when somebody asks, what do you do? You're going to feel like a rock star. It's going to be amazing. Like knowing the answers to those questions. So I guess the argument would be that you're working for free, you're giving away maybe some of your best stuff in the sales process. But the fact of the matter is, uh, it makes things easier for you to just do that. It sounds like it just makes things easier for you to do that than to kind of try and explain what the feeling is going to feel like. You're just like, well, I'll just give you the feeling.
yeah. Well, what's funny is too, I had someone last week who showed up and he sounded kind of sick. And at some point I was like, hey, are you okay? Like, I am happy to reschedule the call. She was like,
Mm,
but it was kind of near it was like 15 minutes into the call, and she had kind of latched on, I guess, to this sort of like, let's make it 10% better.
mm-hmm,
Um, and she said, I have to be honest, when you first said this like 10% better thing, I yeah, I'm not feeling very well, and I really wasn't sure if I was going to be up for this, you know, to try to make it 10% better, but I got into it. And I have to say, I feel better. I was like, okay, I'm good. I'm all just, that's the greatest thing I've ever heard. And
You healed her.
yeah, exactly. I've now changed the whole world and solved world peace. But yeah, like that's that feeling that you're hitting on of just like, I think that's what it was. She knew how to talk about what she does in a way that connected with people that we all kind of want.
hmm Yeah, how do I communicate like this thing? Because the thing with positioning related stuff is that the person, the client in this case, if I'm working with Alice and Alice is like unclear on her positioning and she comes to me to help with that, which is exactly what you're doing there in the example. Alice is always overwhelmed by all of the specifics and little intricacies of all the things she's great at and all the things she could do for all these different kinds of people, but that's way too overwhelming in conversation or as a headline or in 7 seconds you can't explain all of that. And so someone in that situation, they just can't see the forest for the trees, they can't zoom out. So if you zoom someone out and you can articulate in a way that they're like, yes, that's how you describe the forest, and
Hmm.
their head explodes. It's like I can't do it every single time. Like sometimes it's pretty hard. But when you do it for someone, it's like their whole face lights up. They're like head explodes. It's unreal. So if you're getting, I love that you've got it scoped to the LinkedIn headline. It sounds like you might do a little bit of their about also. The
I do.
yeah.
Every time that they get into a little something, just a little deeper, and I'm like, I think that's your about section.
hmm Yeah. So that's great. It's so funny too, because I often, when I'm working with someone on their positioning, we will experiment on their LinkedIn, assuming they use LinkedIn at all. Most people do that I work with. Most people use LinkedIn, and it's like, well, let's experiment with that because it feels a lot less risky than changing like the main headline on your homepage, even though probably more
Hmm.
people see your LinkedIn than your homepage.
Yep.
But but they're like, yeah, let's yeah, it just feels like an experiment. It feels like a safe place to do it, like kind of in public, but quietly in public. And it maybe as a, it's no big deal. You can switch it back. It doesn't feel like permanent. Like somehow making changes to your website feels permanent, or at least for a long time, it's going to be like that. And yeah, it's funny because they'll people give me a lot more leeway on their LinkedIn page than they would on their website, early on. And so I'll be like, all right, let's write this whole thing. And if you can nail it on their LinkedIn, the headline and the about section, it's like you pretty much have their whole website.
Well,
At least their homepage.
I feel like I have the honest, yeah, I have the underpinnings of a great website,
hmm
a well-written website, just from getting your LinkedIn page down. But it's what's so interesting what you just said about less risky. I I took a dentist in in South Texas through my classic process of getting everything super laser focused on his client. Um, and he was no longer just a dentist. He does robotic assisted dental implants,
Oof.
and he invested just a ton of money in this special robot, and it does amazing things. And I just sort of explained to him a lot of what you have taught me, Jonathan, is about niching down and specializing and just positioning, narrowing your audience. And we went through the whole thing, and it was some of my best work. I mean,
Mm.
and he loved it. He showed it to his team. His team loved it. He showed it to his family. His family loved it. And then I was like, cool. So now I'm just going to hand it off to the designer, right? And he's like, I can't do it. And I'm like, I mean, it was so expensive. It was, I'd never charged this much for a full website.
Mm.
And I'm so proud of the work. And I was like, I don't know, what do you mean? And he was like, it's like I got a Ferrari and I can't, I don't know how to drive a Ferrari and I just can't, I'm too nervous. I'm afraid I'll lose my SEO and my directors and everything. And I just like, it was a heartbreaking moment. I mean, you go through this thing, it takes like a month, you're really into it. And all this is to say that there is that it's a website and that feels different for people than say, if I had gone through the same process on LinkedIn, hitting on Yeah, why not? Sure.
Hmm.
I mean, and you can always go in. You click the little pencil on the LinkedIn page, and you change it back to dental, your generic dentist office for family friendly good times. Whatever. But for something about changing his whole, and we're still talking to you, and I do think like there's going to be a middle ground, and I'm absolutely like I do get that fear. It's your lifeline there,
Mm.
but yeah, I just that is a big part. I just got off a sales call right before our talk here, where this guy, had expressed some trepidation, and I said, "It's LinkedIn. It's a tricky beast, and really, it is just like it's worth the risk to go all in on one. In this case, it was a product manager. There's like financial services, and that product manager has the pain. I'm like, okay, talk to that. Use the words product manager. Solve the
Mm.
product manager's pain first. And he just got so excited. He was like, that I'm tired of just being all things to all people, but I wasn't ready. My website is very dialed in to the individual investor. Let's do product manager on the LinkedIn. And it just
Mm.
felt, like you said, like a lot less risky.
Yeah, it's like a little sandbox that they're not afraid to play in.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So let me ask you a related question. It sounds like you get a lot more leads than some people I talk to. So, you said you've given like a number of examples and you said you only started doing this in the last month. So where are these leads coming from? I mean, is your positioning is it all through LinkedIn mostly in DMs, and are people coming to you? Are you reaching out to them?
So, boy, is this like the $1 million question. And I have talked to, so this is going to sound crazy, but this has been going on for 3 weeks, maybe a month. And I'm averaging 12, sometimes 14 calls a week. I mean, I feel like a
That's a lot.
telemarketer sometimes. It is a little, especially with my kind of game show script, and it's just like, all right, let's crank up the show here. But it is the greatest thing that's ever happened to my business. I'm having just the best conversations, and obviously, like they're very focused, um, and they're not personal, which is the nicest part. Um, but it's just like so here's the goods, is I do send out like kind of an automated campaign, and it's not as direct as you'd think. For what I do, like I really, that's my whole thing, is I write websites,
Hmm.
but because it's on LinkedIn, sort of that magic question is something along the lines of like, I think I can make one tweak to your LinkedIn profile that would get you more inquiries, more clicks, more leads.
Hmm.
Can I show you in a quick chat?
Hmm.
Thanks in advance, Kevin. And just that little question sent out. I mean, LinkedIn doesn't like you do it a lot anyway. They kind of throttle you.
Hmm.
So, and I have like Sales Navigator, so it's like the most number, but still, I maybe 10 a day. Um, and you can do it manually.
Sure.
And just for some reason, and it took a while, maybe 2 weeks before that, because there's a different phrasing, and of course, and then there's a different audience. Like in this case, it was targeting speakers.
Hmm.
Some For some reason they hit on people who want to speak more at events and conferences, and um, but that was it. But it started off with attorneys, and I did get some hits with attorneys, but attorneys just happen to be really busy,
Yeah.
like to the point where they just don't have time to honestly like show up for the call, or if they do show up, they get distracted or whatever, and just I don't know, they didn't quite seem as into it. And I think
Hmm.
I went to maybe one more, and then finally I was like, maybe it's speakers, and you narrow down your audience with like geography maybe, or size of company, 1 to 10 or 1 to 50. There's all kinds of ways you can kind of narrow it down. And then there was a little sweet spot where it happened pretty fast. with speakers, and you just start to see, and it's weird because speaker is a nice broad term too, at least for me, where a lot of times that was more of a side hustle, and their real business was, you know, my latest client is a daycare. She owns a daycare. It's
Mm.
really all about just taking care of kids. And another guy is really just about has a nonprofit about really trying to cure cancer,
Mm.
pediatric brain cancer.
Yeesh.
I
Yeah.
mean, real serious stuff. But I will say to a person, my favorite thing is you just think like, oh, what am I going to get here? I mean, leads are awesome unless the people that show up are nuts. And then you're like, oh man, how do I get out of this? Um, and I did have one actually. Out of all those calls, I had one that showed up. It was the coolest thing. She was basically like solving poverty.
Mm.
And I was like, wow, this is amazing. And I kept, I want to go after who is this prospect? And she said, well, it's this and it's that. I'm like, well, where's the revenue coming in? She's like, well, it's self-funded. But we'd already talked about how the budget was $1 billion a year, capital B billion.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, what, self, are you Bill Gates? Like who self? I mean, I really wasn't that suspicious. I was just like, cool, everybody, maybe you won the lottery. I don't know.
Yeah.
And then near the end, did turn into a sales call. I was like, well, here's what I charge to write the rest of your LinkedIn page. And she said, oh, I can't do that. I'm on Social Security. And I just went, okay, well, good stuff. Okay. And I have to say though, it was still a delightful conversation. And luckily it was the vast minority,
Mhm.
very much in the minority, but yeah, everyone else, they do very different things. Some of them work in corporate America.
Mhm.
I do really like the diversity of people, and I'm talking like people of color, just every kind of status. The conversations are so good, and I will say, just like your question at the beginning, almost all of them are like, I can't get nothing out of LinkedIn. And I was like, I hear you. That that is that is a clearly a frustration out there of
Mhm.
people posting every day, and I did that too. I mean, a lot of it was my daily email, which you got me started on, which I
Yeah.
could go on forever about. I now just do the Zapier thing, and I make sure that's posted to my page. But yeah, same thing. I just like I for a while I was doing daily email and daily LinkedIn.
Mm.
And I just was like, it is soul crushing to put in that kind of work and not get at least the kind of leads that I'm thoroughly enjoying. Oh my God, is that frustrating?
Well, it sounds like you figured it out. I mean, that's quite a few calls. I mean, I talk to people that don't get that many leads per year.
I didn't, I pulled out every stop. And it's continued. I do work quite a bit, but I, I don't know. And I'm not saying LinkedIn is to post a lot isn't great. I know it works for some people. I just know like there is something about that one-on-one conversation. What I'm fascinated about this little campaign is it doesn't feel great when you start it. You're thinking, oh, this feels spammy.
Mhm.
I'm that guy now doing spam and it, and there are a couple people that have just kind of had some negative responses. One of them like overtly racist. I'm like, how do you even get that in here? Like what? But it saves you time from not
Right. Yeah.
remotely considering that. But by and large, uh, the people that respond are very sincere and really need your help. And it just when they get on the call, they don't see it as spam. They see it as a lifeline.
Hmm.
And of course, I want to reward that. Like I know there is that little suspicion, like spam is spam, and it's not fun.
Hmm.
And just to kind of overcome a little of that objection, I'm like, you're gonna leave with something that is going to make you feel good, that it's going to help in the best way I can in this little half hour we've we've got. And I think that just kind of restores their faith and certainly my faith in this whole thing, you know.
Yeah, I mean, that's been my experience with outreach on, especially on LinkedIn, where, most people aren't really active on it. I'd say probably more than 50% of people just, they have a profile, but they're not active. So you send them a DM and like nothing. But there's like a certain type of person who is active on LinkedIn and isn't annoyed by it. They like it because, like you said, it's if it's relevant and it feels like a lifeline. It's kind of like, it's like the joke I always joke about. Like if you saw someone choking in a restaurant, you wouldn't not give them a Heimlich because you don't want to interrupt their dinner. It's like,
Right.
you're gonna help, right? So if you see somebody that, or if someone needs help, they're happy when someone says, "Hey, do you need a hand?" They're like, "Yeah, that'd be great." It's just tough to detect, of the 100 people, 100 profiles in front of you, which ones are the ones that need help. It can be hard to tell, or the ones that want help, so.
That's the thing, that the ones that want it, and I've had to kind of create my little templates of, there's that hierarchy of leads that are some are like kind of just will give you just enough to go maybe. Basically, I'm saying maybe, and then you have to kind of nurture that, and that's I'm happy to do that. But it's just interesting. I do think certainly everyone that shows up on that call, the call that I had right before this call with you and me was sort of the ultimate test, because he was a personal friend who I had grown up with. I grew up in Dallas, and I just love this guy. He's just the greatest, and we could talk for hours. And it's just also just a very charismatic guy. He's super, super successful. And even then, I just was like, Kev, do not ask him how he is doing. Don't ask about his family, even though I desperately want to know. I really just adore this person. And it was just so hard for me to go, hey, do you mind if we just get right into this? Like I had to really read the script to him verbatim so I could get through it, because I just don't always have that discipline. And sure enough, like he was like, absolutely. And I was like, oh, thank God. And then
Yeah, because it
we
could
got
be a
through
2 hour
it.
call, right?
Yeah, it's a 2 hour call, and then you haven't helped them. All
Yeah,
you know is like, oh, this was so nice to catch up,
right.
but sorry, didn't help you at all. And that's not what you want. And so, yeah, but it just showed me again, like people, they do want help. They do need this. It is kind of a Heimlich deal. Like, let me interrupt your personal, I'd love to catch up, but let me do this Heimlich. Let me stop you from choking first. And then maybe later we'll catch up on the kids even then in the last minute, I was like, kids are good. Oh, kids are so good. Hey, let's talk next week. All right, bye-bye. I mean, it was just so beautiful. It was a beautiful thing.
That's a
Yeah.
skill, being able to keep a phone call to 30 minutes, especially a working call. That's impressive.
Well, it's so nice. A huge part of that is the faster I can get into the question I need to ask to get the words I need to see if I can help you. That little bit is the beginning of a sort of a plot that has a definite ending, where I just know where that call is going to go, how to wrap it up. And there's even that moment, this happened on this call right before, where it got a little weedy, where like, I'm like, okay, I think it's this. We're starting to talk about some other stuff. It's getting a little complicated. Can we talk about this next week? And that, again, like really respects their time and mine. It sort of stops us from making this too heavy, because it should not be too heavy. And I know this happens every time. When we come back to it, we will figure it out so much faster by having a little break, and that it's the end that really is helpful for all of us, is knowing, oh, there's an end, and hey, here's my time, gotta run. And I do say it at the beginning of the call, even like, hey, I've got a hard stop. Can we dive right into this? And that's like, oh, there's an end. Whew, thank goodness. Okay, this
Yeah.
guy's not gonna take up my whole day here.
It's funny that we did an interview, Rochelle and I on the Business of Authority did an interview with Priya Parker, which alas was lost to the internet, but it deleted.
Oh.
But a big point of hers, she wrote a book, a fabulous book called The Art of Gathering. And one of the things she says about it is like a good host will set up the end. Like it shouldn't a gathering, whatever, whether it's a dinner party or a meeting, it shouldn't just peter out. It should have like a definite end. It's, I mean, there's many things that the host has a responsibility to do many things, but one of the things is that it needs to have a kind of a ritual entrance at the beginning almost in, virtual or otherwise. And then it needs to have like a definite end. And it's funny you said that because it allows in the book, she says it allows the participants to relax while they're there because they're not looking for the exit or figuring out how they're going to get out of here or whatever, because they know it's going to have an end and they know when it's going to be. Yeah.
So I actually I picked in the wildest of places. I have this meditation center I go to, and there's these once a week sort of classes, and they always end with a question and answer. Like we meditate, and then he gives a little talk, which is delightful, and then there's a little time for questions and answers. And those questions and answers, you could talk about any one of those forever. And he is so good about saying, okay, I'm gonna stop you there because we really want to respect everyone's time and just know that people have obligations. And so and then he takes another maybe 20 seconds to go, okay, let's let go of the words and a nice little pleasantry to leave, and then people leave, and I just love that little boundary and just knowing like, oh yeah, we could have gone on forever, but this is a safe hour where I just know I can plan and I can have that relief. Like I have I have a way out.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's like a kid's cry. Well, anything. I mean, think of any appointment that you have. You want it you want it to end when it's supposed to end because you got to plan your day around it. So like even when my kid's karate class gets out like 10 minutes late, it can, it's disruptive. So being able to, that's kind of like earlier when I said being able to keep a working call to 30 minutes is a skill. It's not just good for you because then you can fit in more calls or you're not wasting time or whatever, but it's also good for the participant because for the same reason. And knowing that it's going to stop at that point presumably would allow them to kind of relax and really get into it right away and it feel like they are, not to overstate it, but like under the care of a professional, like this is, you don't have to worry. It's gonna take 30 minutes. We're gonna be out of here, and you're gonna have this at the end, and you're gonna love it. Yeah, very
Yeah,
cool.
yeah, I love that.
Cool. That's amazing. Well, thanks for sharing all this. I suspect that people are going to want to ask you follow-up questions about this.
Cool.
Where should people go to find out more about what you're doing and maybe get in touch with you, perhaps on LinkedIn even?
Yeah, so if you just go on LinkedIn and either put in my name, which is a tough one to spell, it's Kevin Freidberg. It's Freidberg, or 7-second websites is maybe a little more Googleable. But yeah, and then I always like to plug, especially with you, I do have a daily email, which is, and this is my favorite line. It really is daily, and people really do stay subscribed. Which is a Jonathan Stark trademark that I'm cribbing, but it's 7secondwebsites.com/daily.
Yeah, I love the daily email. It's wild. It's almost like I feel like I'm getting a haiku in my inbox every morning.
It's just, I mean, it's just funny when you and I first started, I needed many things, but I remember at the very beginning, I'm like, okay, but if I only get one thing, just tell me how to write a daily email. How do you do it? I just want to know. And that's when you really changed my professional, really my personal life. That is, there's something very meditative. I don't know what the magic is even just yet, but it's been a very, very lovely thing. Yeah.
Yeah, everybody I talk to that takes the leap, makes the plunge, whatever the saying is. Everybody that does it is like, wow, this is transformational, you know? And it's kind of like,
Yeah.
it's hard to describe to people on the other side that haven't jumped. They're like, well, if I'm going to put in all this time, like, how many leads am I going to get from it? Like, when's it going to start to pay off? And I'm like, no, 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 no.
Yeah.
It's not about that. You'll get there. Like, that'll be a side effect, but it's more about like that deepening your thinking and publishing, putting things into the world. And it's not quite to the karma level of like, just do good things and goodness will come back to you, but it's amazing.
It's the, you know what it is, just to kind of bring it full circle, because you said this. This is my favorite part too. Is when we first started, you explained like, well, here's how to do the daily email, and I was like, hey, Jonathan, I got an idea. What if I outsourced it? To like some really
Classic.
cheap person, that like a junior intern or something. Then I'd be guaranteed to have a daily email. And he was like, yeah, it'd be awesome. I mean, you wouldn't get any benefit, but well, and then this was the best part too. He was like, here's a big part of it is when you do it, you really know your stuff on sales calls, and that's of course because sales calls was just such a pain point for me.
Hmm.
Then now it was really getting religion. I was like, yeah, cool. I am 100. I'm dialed in. And sure enough, I mean, especially now with all these sales calls, stuff comes out of my mouth that I'm like, where did that come from? But there it was, and they're like, yeah, absolutely. I'm like, cool, because that was not planned, but I'm glad that was there.
Yeah.
And I know it's from that daily email. There's just something about that happens too many times where I'm like, I just happen to say the right thing at the right time, and I think is yeah, like you said, it's that deep thinking, I guess.
It's some kind of it's the practice of it. It does something to your brain that's extremely positive.
Mm.
But yeah, well, we can we can talk all day about daily email, that's for sure.
Yes, of course.
But yeah, so go to Kevin's website, check out the daily email if you want to see someone who's really doing a great job of it. And yeah, I guess we can leave it for there.
Jonathan, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, thanks for coming on. All right, folks, that's it for this week. I'm Jonathan Stark, and I hope you join me again next time for Ditching Hourly. Bye.